We interrupt our normal program. Normal broadcasting will now be discontinued for an indefinite period.
This station will continue to stay on the air throughout the alert period to bring you authentic information. Telephone service to your home may be cut off. If you can plug in your radio in the basement, take it with you. Use a portable radio set if you have one.
If you're an amateur radio enthusiast looking for the perfect portable HF transceiver, you've probably come across Xiegu's offerings, which include the X5105, the X6100, and the newer X6200. I own the X5105 and the 6100, and I wanted to provide some final thoughts on the 6100 so far because I've done a few videos featuring the 6100. I covered my JS8 call settings, how to upgrade the firmware, and then I also did an HF field test with this radio. Like its predecessor, the X5105, the 6100 is a compact transceiver that incorporates a rugged design and portability. The 6100 has an auto-tuner, built-in battery, color screen with a waterfall display and an SDR-based architecture under the hood. The maximum power output is advertised at 10 watts when connected to an external power supply. And when operating only on the internal battery, the max power output is 5 watts. I find the color screen convenient. It's something the X5105 doesn't have. But if you're someone that doesn't care too much about those kinds of frills, then the X5105 is still a serviceable rig for portable use. But if you're into more modern features, such as the performance of an SDR radio, then the X6100 is hard to beat, especially at the current price point of approximately $565. Other differences between the X6100 and its predecessor include the power outputs. So the X5105 is limited to 5 watts, no matter if you're using the internal battery or an external power supply, whereas I mentioned a moment ago, the X6100 does offer 10 watts when you're connected to that external power supply. While both have an automatic antenna tuner and internal batteries, some other differences are the X5105 has a monochrome LCD and the 6100's display is color, and the X5105 also doesn't have Bluetooth or Wi-Fi capability while the 6100 does. However, the battery life on the X5105 does appear to last a little bit longer than the 6100, which is something that I've noticed when using both in the field. When it comes to modes, both can do single sideband, CW, AM, FM, and RTTY. And regarding digital modes, one of the biggest differences is the 6100 has a built-in sound card. So all I need to do for working with JS8 Call is connect via USB cable to my Windows tablet. Using digital modes with the X5105, I find it a bit more complicated at times and a little frustrating because I've been able to get JS8 Call working on the X5105 with both a DigiRig and the external interface that comes with the radio. But I've had mixed results when trying to get everything to work the way that I want. And so an example would be I had some issues with getting the rig control and push to talk to work with JS8 Call when working with either the DigiRig or the external interface for the X5105. This is the data interface card that comes with the X5105. And I don't know who came up with this, but whoever it was should be taken behind a shed and shot. I've always hated this thing. I don't like that it's not enclosed. I'm often in a desert environment, and I really don't like having components exposed to the elements. I'm already in a setting where there's a lot of debris and dirt that can affect my equipment, and having something that's not enclosed to help protect the circuit board just isn't for me. The 6100 is, I find, easier to work with when it comes to setting up JS8 Call because of the internal sound card. And all I need to do is plug a USB cable from the dev port to my machine, and I don't have to worry about an external interface or build any wires. And these are all of the different wires that came with the X5105. Despite some of the things I don't like about the X5105, that doesn't mean the 6100 doesn't have its own set of issues as well. For instance, I ran into some problems with getting the rig control to function as expected with JS8 Call. And to band-aid that issue, I was able to use FL Rig as my rig control between the software and the radio. But other than that, using GSA Call with the 6100 was mostly straightforward. I would say if you're prioritizing digital modes, which in my case, I use GSA Call quite a bit, then I think the X6100 is a better option over the X5105, in my opinion. But if that's not your focus, then the X5105 is still a solid rig for portable use. One thing that I liked on the 6100 is the fact that it came with a DC power cable. That wasn't the case with the X5105. Although they included several cables, they were terminated at the end, so I had to build my own, which was kind of annoying. After owning the X5105 for a while, I was expecting the 6100 to have a comparable form factor, and it was about what I was hoping for. My intention for this radio is to have something that I can fit inside my hiking pack along with a portable antenna and get up and running in a matter of minutes. The chassis on the radio appears to be aluminum, and so far it seems to be fairly rugged. I've taken it on a couple of hiking adventures so far, and it appears to be holding up pretty well. One thing that I don't like is the kickstand. Basically, the legs on the X6100 don't appear to be as rugged as the ones on the X5105. They're just, I don't know, they just seem a little bit flimsy to me, whereas on the X5105, they're pretty solid. Other than that, I like the overall feel, look, and quality of the radio. I really like the color display on the 6100, and although it's not a touchscreen, navigating the menu and figuring out its structure is pretty easy to learn fairly quickly. The buttons are also backlit. That's nice to have out in the field. The audio on the 6100 also seems to be an improvement over the X5105, and I've noticed with a lot of Xiegu radios that I've experimented with, the audio can be a bit rough at times, but with the 6100, it does seem to be improved, and it's certainly sufficient for my field operations. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't I buy the X6200? That's the newer version instead of the 6100. And that really has to do with my personal baggage in that I'm not an early adopter of the latest, greatest device. And so I considered the X6200, and the main differences I noticed between it and the 6100 are the price point. The 6200 is currently retailing at Radio Oddity for around $800, and the 6100 is approximately $565. The 6200 does have a removable battery, which is pretty cool, and the 6100 has a built-in battery. The 6200 is advertised as having a power output of 8 watts, and as I mentioned before, the 6100 is 10. And so those few differences weren't really enough to compel me to pay another $235 more for the latest model. Another reason that I'm not an early adopter when it comes to Xiegu radios is my experience with some of their products is often that the consumer ends up being the beta tester. And so they'll release a radio like the 61 or 6200, and initially the firmware might be buggy. The consumer will report those issues. A new firmware version is released, and this process will continue until many of the major bugs are resolved. And so if you purchase one of these radios, be prepared for the risk that you might have to suffer through some buggy firmware versions until a solution for any issues you discover are released in a future update. One thing I'm a bit surprised about is that Radio Oddity is still selling the X5105 for around $549. For 16 more bucks, it makes more sense to buy the 6100 and get a better quality radio, in my opinion. With the 6100 selling at the price point it's currently at, I would find it difficult to justify paying $549 for its predecessor. The 6100 also has an interesting voice messaging memory keying function, which is useful if you're doing activations in the field. You can basically automate your exchanges, which is kind of cool. While researching the X6100 before buying it, I read some comments online that the receiver is prone to overload when it's near a broadcast station. And I personally haven't run into that, so it hasn't been an issue for me so far. But if you've run into that, leave a comment in the comment section and let me know what your experience is. Overall, I think there's a lot to like about this radio. I really like the internal antenna tuner. It has a built-in microphone in addition to the external mic. The X5100 does have both of those as well. And the size and weight of the radio is, perfect for my hiking pack. It's got a rugged design and excellent screen color and resolution, and the price point's competitive when compared to similar offerings from other manufacturers. Some things I would like to see improvements on are the kickstand. As I mentioned, the folding legs don't seem to be as rugged as the ones on its predecessor. Buggy firmware, which could result in not all the features advertised functioning as expected. I would also like to have seen Xiegu offer the 6100 with a removable battery like the 6200 has. Aside from the few minor issues that I mentioned, and if you don't mind working through some of the firmware updates, and it's really not that big of a deal. From my experience, the process to update to the next firmware version is pretty easy. I did a video on the process, and if you're interested in checking that out, please do so. But I think if you're in the market for an affordable HF field radio, then I do think the 6100 is worth considering. So far, it's been a really great rig for me, and it was intended as a replacement for the X5100, which I primarily just keep in my ham shack now, and the 6100 is my primary field radio for HF. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this radio, and hopefully some of the things that I've mentioned might help somebody out there that's considering one. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.